Well, I wouldn't say I'm tight. Most other people do. But I make my own washers. Cheaper than the Chinese ones and better. I think it's about 3mm thick silicone sheet. I bought it off eBay ages ago. And I bought a 21mm punch, which is big enough for the centre hole for a 1/2 inch thread. Then just use one of the washers. So all I do now, rather than cut this out and then try and line up the hole, I make the hole first, then line up the washer over the hole, then draw around the outside so you can see where you can cut. But so far the proof in the pudding is they're working, because they ain't leaking anymore. I did make some out of flan cases, silicone baking flan cases or baking trays, but they're way too thin when I chopped them out. I have used them, but at the minute this is the HERMS, so I've just put a toilet blanking plug with a couple of those little thin ones to seal that hole up, so I can put the water up to the top level, so I can test the integrity of the heating element seal, the sight glass seal and the tap seal, which all had the same problem as the one in the last one, so I redone them and pressure tested them prior to fitting, so none of this leaked, but we did get a slight little dribble presumably down the thread, and so I put some more of that thread tape further up, and she's held so far so good. It's been, I don't know, 1.5 to 2 hours. A little bit of deforming on the seal here where I've nipped it up, but it seems to have held. My only concern with this thin aluminium tube, they'd only put these in hand tight, so I put a bit of that pipe jointing compound on this, because it's about 1/8, I think it's a small thread that goes into this block. This little cap is threaded, and then this hollow tube is threaded both ends and sits there. There's a little silicone seal down in there, and the glass tube basically sits in that, and the only way that seals is by the pressure of that being screwed into it and this one up the top. So if that comes unscrewed, there's effectively no seal there. It's all aluminium, so not very robust. You can move this and wiggle it about, so I didn't want this coming loose. Water starting to jet out of here. So I've found some old chrome pipe clips and just temporarily Jubilee clipped it there so I can keep it steady and whack a little hole in there at some stage, and put a couple of self tappers in there, but luckily they were just the right size for that. My only other concern now I've seen this is if it will show up. There is an airspace between the back plate of the electric box, because they do have a standoff on the back. You can see these little moulded pips and the bits there, which would be for the screw holes, obviously to stop the box deforming when you screw it to a wall. My only concern is obviously there being a gap. Should this go soft, the tension of the screw thread against the element pushing against this, if that goes soft, then the element seating will go loose, and that means it will piss out with about 45 litres of water in it. So I'm going to have to give it a depth test and go and find my quick test block and wire it up to the outlet on the panel, do a bit of jerry rigging and give it a crucifixion test, see if it holds up, because I have not got the problem is, although there's a gap now, when you try and screw that all together, there is no gap. I mean, you look at that, you can't even get that nut done up tight. And then you've got the thickness of the kettle wall between that. So allowing for the little bit of deformity of the silicone as you're nipping it up. That still won't flush that nut, so one, I haven't got any inch diameter washers, because you'd want something that size, and about half the thickness of that. The only thing I can think of is the copper backing washers that go on our cable glands, like them up there, but I have not got anything that big. All I've got is another old surplus silicone washer, which may or may not suffice. Now I'll only have this problem with this kettle because the boil kettle is going to have a tri-clamp fitting. Because initially when I started buying all this stuff, one, you couldn't get it. If you could find it, it was expensive. So down in the box of joy here somewhere is the keg cleaning adapter. Got to do that as well. So we've got that on a disconnect so it can go on the CIP for the conical. And then those two outlets will be for the gas and liquid on your corny keg, and then obviously I need another piece to attach it to some kind of submersible pump, which I've yet to acquire. It's some bloody wear. One moment please. Yeah, so I bought one of these. So you put a whacking great hole in your kettle and screw that in, and that gives you a 1.5 inch tri-clamp fitting. Then you buy one of these and that screws on to your 1 inch. I can't do one-handed, even better if I had it in shot. So that then goes like that. And that goes like that, and you have a nice easy access fitting, because at the end of brew day, if you want to rinse your kettle out, you haven't got to drag 6 foot of mains lead with you, because obviously that one's going to be hardwired, so you'd have to coil the cable up and take it with you. But with this one, you can just remove the element, put a blanking plate on this, put your tri-clamp back over, which I've already purchased, and go and rinse your kettle out if you need to do that. But then eventually these came down at a little bit more sensible money, and these will do away with the electric box, because inside you've got the same sort of arrangement with a threaded tri-clamp. And then that goes on your shield, so you can attach your element to this piece. That's threaded inside. Then there you've got an earthing point on there. So you'll turn that whole stainless shroud into your housing, which is kind of a bit like this one. Except obviously this goes back to being in the sidewall, but again you could attach one of those tri-clamps and replace the nut, put a tri-clamp on it and turn it into the same thing. You just haven't got the obviously you lose all this when the element goes pop eventually, but this is an ultra low watt high density or whatever they're called. They don't go when they're dry, but I don't think it will fit in the keg as I said last time, but it was too cheap to pass up, considerably cheaper than what Angel Homebrew charged for them. But yeah, so that brings us up to the electricals, or not as the case may be, the boil kettle has progressed no more. I've just got that temporarily rigged up. Same as that. I had a couple of the male threaded tri-clamps that didn't seem to fit anything. They didn't work with BSP, they didn't work with BSP taper, they didn't work with American MPT taper thread. I don't know what they cut them with, but they did not marry up to anything I've got. The only thing, for some bizarre reason, if I can find it, is the nut on this. There's quite a lot of slop in it, although you can't do it with this one because it's got a wash around it. They're the ones that come with the false bottoms, which have got a ridiculously tiny, useless hole in them. So I swapped that out for a bigger one. Where's the mash tun? Whether you can see it in there. So I put a hose barb on that one, so that ended up with one of these being surplus. I've utilised that bit for my whirlpool port, which is on the end of that. And the nut fits this. It's about the only thing it does. It's got enough slop in it that, and somehow one of these washers goes against the back here without falling through. Although if it does start to play up, I'll either have to put the other nut on, so we've got one each side, or I'll tack weld this washer as a backing piece, because this tri-clamp fits nothing. It was only good for giving away to someone that could weld it onto a kettle or something, but I've managed to finally find a use for it. It was a pair. One of them I managed to, it will fit in that. It will screw in far enough to do the job. It was just this one. I even ground it off, cut it, I even tried to cut a new thread on it. Didn't work. Not with stainless, just too hard. But at the minute it seems to work. It's only finger tight at the minute, but we've got that set up like that, so that will be the steam condenser. So hopefully that'll work. We have tested all this already. The only problem with this again was these particular tri-clamp fittings. They don't do in BSP, they only do it in NPT. So the threads are a force fit. One works better than the other because obviously the taper goes in a different direction. I think there was a tiniest of tiny weeps from one of these bits, but obviously it doesn't really matter in here because you're spraying a jet of water out in here anyway. So that should suffice with that. If we can do it one-handed, no. That'll do. So that hopefully will alleviate the steam. Or not. If it don't work, it don't work. I'll just put a blanking plate on that and get rid of these bits. I bought enough to make two, because the idea was, if it works, I'll sell the other one and that'll pay for my one. Great plans that never come to fruition. So the test on this, so far so good. Again, it's been the tape, and the saving grace has been multi-purpose sealant, which pretty much this stuff works on everything bar CO2, because I think CO2 gas has a reaction with this stuff and dissolves it. I was looking on the material data sheet. So I've been sort of working my way up with this from the bottom up, because once the coil goes in you can't really get round or anything to nip it up. I still can't find a stainless steel coil, not for the money I want to pay anyway. They're all the wrong direction towards £100 to fit in here, and then obviously this keg would be no good now because obviously it's cut to fit this coil, which I think is 10 metres of 10mm copper. And they try and rip you off for these. I think some places are charging 11 to 15 quid a pop for these. Admittedly they're half inch. This is a 10mm, a half inch thread, but they're a half inch coil. Can't even get them from China, the coils. because obviously the bulk of them, the shipping costs are ridiculous. You're looking at £30 shipping, 70 odd pound for a coil plus the VAT, so you're back up to 100 quid again. So copper it is at the minute. Unless I can find a bigger 50-foot coil, then I'll convert the other brew pot, which is down there. But yeah, that's it at the minute. Progress is sort of ongoing, same as I said last time. I do a bit and then have to leave it because it's too late. So one pot down, that's all watertight. The only bit that isn't fixed is this, because that might end up being a tri-clamp fitting. And then we've got our adjustable sparge arm, which should be okay. I've got a different one of them to go on there if you need to make it lower. But obviously until it gets tested in anger, it will remain as such. Then obviously I've got to give everything a deep clean with the detergent and get all the oil residue and bits and pieces out. They've had a jet wash so far, but that's it. I noticed when filling them up there's still a little bit of oil slick floating around the top on them. So we'll keep trekking on and piecing about. I've got some PT100s on order for that. That's a point, I need to put that in the kettle to put the probe in, and I can't find any short enough. Well, I can, but they're stupid money, the little 1/2-inch probes. So that's it for now, I think.